เคได้ค่ะ So just to remind you that if you have any expectations to these workshops, don't forget to share your thoughts and your view through the post-it and paste it in your left hand of the flip chart. Thank youค่ะ that if you have any expectations to these workshops, don't forget to share your thoughts and your view through the post-it and paste it in your left hand of the flip chart. Thank youค่ะ if you Okay, I think welcome back everyone. I hope you enjoy coffee break and some chit chat together with the participants. And I hope that everyone are ready to dive into our next sessions. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Nurul Alam, our resilient infrastructure specialist from ADPC as the moderator for the next discussions on risk-informed urban governance. Let's give him a warm welcome, and the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. So this is Nurul. Again, thanks, Kunpi, for introducing me. And I have been given this role to moderate this exciting first session on risk-informed urban governance. So first of all, this risk-informed urban governance, what is this? Just to, we are looking at more on the approaches and steps, how we integrate the comprehensive risk information analytics in our decision-making process. And with ADPC and our partners and also learners, it's a lot of experiences that there, lot of insights and experiences on the importance of risk-informed urban planning, urban governance for strengthening resilience of the cities are there. In this session, we have very interesting, diverse field of talking points from our esteemed panelists. And we will discuss about innovative data tools that is required for risk assessment, risk visualization from the point of view from overview on the risk-informed urban governance, and as well as we'll touch upon the nature-based solutions and others. Having said that, I would like to invite our esteemed panelist here, Mr. Kurt Garrigan, Chief Sustainable Urban Development Section, UNESCAP. Please have a seat here. Sunita Sudrak, Associate Program Management Officer, UNDRR. Anthony Maugnot from AFD. Suprani Kampongsun from IUCN. And Chintaka Ganepola from ADPC. Thank you. So, as we all are here for this urban resilience part of workshop here, I would like to set up our tune and scene setting by Mr. Kurt Garrigan. Kurt Garrigan is the Chief of Sustainable Urban Development Section for ESCAP, UNESCAP. In this role, he contributes to the ESCAP's effort to promote sustainable urban solutions in cities throughout the region. So I would like to invite Kurt to start off his presentation and set up the scene and also give us some insights about his work in UNESCAP. Kurt.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind introduction, and thank you to the organizers, ADPC and NORAD for this workshop, including ESCAP. I'm going to try to unpack a little bit risk-informed urban governance. Each of those words has a significant meaning in terms of the overall discussion and the objectives of this workshop. But let me just start by giving a little bit of context. And you've heard some of this before. The region is majority urban, but from an environmental standpoint and a vulnerability standpoint, the cities in the region are especially at risk. 70% of the region's emissions come from urban areas. It's not a new statistic, but what it does indicate is that without the engagement of cities and those urban areas, that the transition to achieve the objectives of the Paris Climate Agreement will simply not be possible. We also know that the cities in the region are facing significant environmental risks, including loss of biodiversity, including risks of flooding and other disasters, and that cities in the region regularly compete for the title of the worst air quality in the world. And it's not something that they would like to compete for, but it's something that is a fact, that Asia Pacific has the worst air quality in urban areas in the world. And so all of these issues come together, affecting the health, well-being, livelihoods of the population. And this is a growing population, and it's not just a number of residents, urban residents, currently or in future projections. These populations are living amidst different intersecting crises, whether it be climate, whether it be energy, whether it be food insecurity, recovery from the pandemic, the housing crisis. And what we need to consider even more are the changing demographics, an aging population, the needs of a shifting demographics. It's not just the numbers of people that are moving to cities or migrating to cities. It's the changing needs that we find in those cities that is especially important. How do you plan the infrastructure, the public services, and protect the environment amidst those crises and those changing demographics? You saw, I think, this graphic earlier in Sanaka's presentation. This is the updated graphic from ESCAP's most recent SDG progress report that was released in advance of the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development last week. And what the analysis indicates is that there are no SDGs of the 17 that are to be achieved by 2030 at the current pace. In fact, analysis indicates that at the current pace, the region will not achieve all 17 of the SDGs until 2062, a mere 32 years after the target date. There has been some positive action on reducing poverty and sustainable industry, innovation, infrastructure in the region, but even where we see that progress in SDG goals 1 and 9, it's insufficient to reach by 2030. What you see in the red is climate action, SDG 13. And so this is where there's actually regression in the region. There's not enough action to achieve, to even reverse the trend in climate action at this point. So this is just a snapshot of the progress so far, where we see a little bit of progress on 1 and 9. Significant attention needs to be placed on 13, but you see even that line, the vertical line in the middle of the graph, is where countries should be at this stage. And so most of the SDGs, including the ones that we're talking about here, the urban related SDGs, water, SDG 11, energy, are all lagging significantly behind. If we were to dive a little bit more deeply into the progress in this analytical report, you see on the right side, if you look at just SDG 11, you'll see that nearly 60% of the indicators, there is no data to support measurement or progress. So when we talk about risk informing or informing any kind of policy, absent any kind of sufficient data, it's hard to develop policies to address some of these intersecting issues. If you look, and again, apologies for the small size of the graph of the visual, But where you see the red dots in each of the goals is where there is regression at this point. And because I can't see them either, I need to go to my cheat sheet here. In goal 1.5 on resilience to disasters, we see a red dot, meaning we need to reverse the trend of regression. On 6.6 and goal 6 on water-related ecosystems, key to resilience and urban areas as well, we see regression. 11.5, resilience to disasters in urban areas, we see regression. 12.2, sustainable use of natural resources, we see regression. Climate change policy, 13.2, we see regression. Although there is some progress in 13.1 on resilience and adaptive capacity. So countries are building their capacity for climate change, but the policies themselves are simply not advancing quickly enough. And I want to point out one in particular that's in 17, goal 17. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's 17.4 on debt sustainability. We know when we talk about resilience issues that a lot of that requires investment in infrastructure. Some of that, most of that is not an enterprise investment, meaning it doesn't generate revenue. So the issue is, how do we finance those investments when we already have a number of countries that are facing significant debt crises or emerging debt crises? So all of these are going to how we build risk-informed urban governance. This slide, we know cities and climate action in Asia Pacific is incredibly important. Most of the cities located in climate vulnerable areas, such as low elevations, coastal zones, and valleys across the region. Most of the emissions in cities from transportation and energy. The current state of cities and climate action is that the impact of climate is increasing in these cities, increasing in loss and damage, but there is a lack of engagement of cities in nationally determined contributions. There's insufficient and inadequate progress on localization and the vertical and cross municipal climate cooperation. Meaning, while cities may be taking some climate action or building resilience within their own city, it's not captured or incorporated or strengthened by the cooperation between the local authorities and the national authorities. So there are tools and targets that are available. Climate action, we know, has co-benefits, including on the well-being and health. For instance, climate action also will increase, improve the air quality, and again, affecting the lives and livelihoods. So actions on climate and building resilience can reduce pollution and improve respiratory and overall health, which have cross benefits in other SDGs. When we talk about governance, we talk about urban governance, but we're talking about multi-level governance frameworks. Often when we think about governance, people think government and think about management. But governance is actually more about engagement than it is about management. So what are the multi-level governance frameworks that engage civil society, the private sector, local and national authorities? And we see that there are frameworks to support systems where different levels of government interact. But then there are instruments, multi-level governance instruments, that are platforms, the funding mechanisms, the action plans that include private sector and civil society, NGOs, international organizations as well, to support climate action at the local or city level. Some of the key messages that are coming from the broadening discussion about multi-level government frameworks are how adaptation and mitigation actions are complex, but need to be discussed and co-developed by all of those stakeholders and organizations that are engaged in that. We know that these investments are not inexpensive, that they're expensive, they're complex, they require, if they're going to be effective, sometimes technologically advanced implementation efforts. And so how do you build the capacity, improve the effectiveness of those actions, leverage technologies, and ensure that information is generated from those investments as well. A lot of this discussion revolves around decentralization, which can be very effective for local governments. But it also can create bottlenecks where systems do not support the effective interactions between levels of government, whether it's local to provincial, whether it's provincial to national. There can be bottlenecks. We also know that when it comes to investment, when it comes to taking on debt, that many local authorities, especially where there is necessary infrastructure investment based on those population and demographic trends, that those cities are least capable of managing those financial investments. They don't have the credit history to access capital. They may not be enabled from their national government to finance long-term investments. And so there needs to be a co-design of the investment strategies and systems as well. And that is all about the discussion on multi-level governance. So there are institutional instruments and then cross-cutting instruments which need to work hand in hand. The climate finance, the measuring, reporting, and verification, which is not just on the performance of the investment, but it's the fiscal capacity and return on investments that also needs to be monitored and verified as well to make certain those investments and allow for financial institutions to have confidence in the investments themselves. That requires the city level capacity to be built at the same time. And recognizing that also that not all information, either on effectiveness or on actions, is within the control of government. Citizens need to be engaged both to develop information, to take part in actions, and to support political will for further advancement. Again, digitization and leveraging technologies is also important, but all of these instruments can be used at various stages of climate planning. When we talk broadly about multi-level governance, what we're really talking about is how do you localize efforts and actions. And this entire discussion and advancing progress against the SDGs could benefit from localization. And it's true not just in terms of climate action, but it's true in terms of sectoral initiatives as well. So local climate action plans, local air pollution action plans, local transportation, local mobility plans, all are part of localization efforts that contribute either to the SDGs or to national climate strategies. There are a number of tools, including voluntary local reviews, and ESCAP and partners developed VLR guidelines in 2020 to support cities to identify the progress that they're making on these initiatives and document them and make sure that they become part of the national reporting as well. And that national reporting is important because that also helps to identify where there are either policy gaps or information gaps that can be filled through enhanced cooperation. So again, when we talk about risk-informed urban governance, we're talking about building the coordination mechanisms among different levels of governance to help inform policies and reduce risks. And then let me just close with some of the work that ESCAP, UN Habitat, and other partners had done on trying to provide normative guidance for cities. We released at the Asia Pacific Urban Forum in October the flagship report, Crisis Resilient Urban Futures, which takes into account many of these intersecting crises, demographic trends, and the progress against the SDGs, and tries to identify key areas where all cities, regardless of their starting point, should focus. The first is on urban and territorial planning. And we know that the region remains very far behind on addressing issues of informal settlements. And that's one area where risks and vulnerabilities are most prominent, is in the informal sector. So urban territorial planning, as Tam mentioned earlier, it looks at urban and rural continuums, but it also looks at how to foster low carbon and inclusive development for all, obviously, and reduces risk in parallel. Looking specifically at climate resilient urban futures, how is the climate crisis working with cities and with their planning efforts? How is it integrated in those urban communities to help build resilience, but also how is it supported or enabled by national or subnational policy coherence? The third, again, is leveraging digital technologies and the momentum behind smart cities that also helps to create new and different kinds of information and data that can be used to inform risk and risk reduction policies and actions. But that also requires some capacity building, again, to ensure that cities can use that information on a regular basis. And the fourth really is looking at urban finance. How do you, when you develop all of these policy solutions and develop coherent approaches, integrated approaches to climate and energy and housing and transport all together, how do you finance those solutions as well? So there's an entire chapter on that as well. We say that all cities need to work on these four key thematic areas in order to be successful and build their crisis resilient urban futures. And I think hopefully that's a good scene setting for this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kurt. It was great hearing from you about urban resilience and trying to connect with SCAPS and your own work. And I see a lot of things that has been already talked about, which is now going to be discussed a bit from our other colleagues in the panelist. So at this moment, I would like to invite just a housekeeping information is we will first finish our all presentations from the panelists, then we'll go with the question and answer. And my colleagues are taking care of the time. And thanks, Kurt, to finishing your presentation on time, and that's great. So I'm inviting Ms. Sunisa Sudrak, Associate Program Management Officer, UNDRR. She's currently engaged as an Associate Program Manager with the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction at the Regional Office for Asia and Pacific in Bangkok. In this capacity, she is an integral part of the Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative. I think she will be talking about it today, and then we'll try to give us an insight, like what are the things we can learn from her, and moving on. Over to you, Concepcion.
Thank you very much. So as Kurt set the scene on how we are going to discuss. So for my session, I'll just share with you, like, this is one of the initiative from all of initiative that we means like all of us, like working together to help the local government to build resilience. So for me, under UNDRR, so we have one initiative that called Making City Resilience. Some of you might heard about that. Some of you might heard like from the first time. So Making City Resilience, or in a short name, is MCR 2030. So we become initiative from 10 years ago that we are working as a campaign. So at that time, we focusing on like try to encourage local government just to do the mainstream DRR or urban resilience into their local planning. But then like after 10 years, so we thought that, well, maybe it's a time to do something to make it happen. So then like it's turned out that Making City Resilience become initiative starting from 2020. Now it's just the fourth years of the second phase. So what MCR 2030 aims to bring? So first of all, like we understand that our global framework, it all implement at the local level. So that's why the local level is the forefront opportunities. So like in order to do so, some of the local governments, so sometimes like they might reluctant or don't have like idea on how to start implementing. So that's why MCR is one of the initiatives that working together with them. So what MCR is doing now, first of all, we have the resilience roadmap for them. So which is like it's a simple words that we just helping them to understand what they have to do. or what they should do, like in order to implement those global framework, for example, SDG or Sendai framework or New Urban Agenda or even Paris Agreement, because all of them like are interconnected with each other. So from that, like the resilience roadmap, well, I can say that like the cities also like us, like individual. They are, some of them, they are very advanced. Some of them, they just getting to understand this topic. So that's why the MCR, we aim to connect not only city to city together, but we also connect city to partners or connect city to tools or resources. So they don't need to start like from searching like Google. So if they want to know that who can working with them, like on, for example, like maybe flood management. So they just like working with your MCR 2030s, and then yeah, we can see that how the cities or which agency or even like other city working on the same thing, that they are the same interest. So the global partnership, the regional network, as I said, is not only the cities, and also like we also like use some kind of technologies to help the city to connect them with like more better. So we have some kind of like online dashboard, which is not only the marketplace that for the city to connect. It's like Facebook actually, but it's also like connect them like or they can learn from them. They can learn from other, them means the city. They can learn from other cities on maybe like some issue that they might interest. And also, we are not only like try to help the city to connect like among city. It's also like help them to connect with different stakeholders within the city or even the national government, because actually city is the best teacher. So it's not like us, or it's not like UNDR that understand the teacher best, but actually understand the city best, but actually the city is the one who understand each other. So from that, from what MCR aims to bring, so this, I will just show you some tools and guidelines that we currently working with them. So in order to like building resilience or start like risk informed governance. So then first of all, I think like this cycle, you may have, some of you like might familiar with that, like starting from, you need to understand first, like in order to build resilience, so what guideline that you are going to do, and then next one, you need to understand where we are or where you are at this moment, and then developing the plan, and then start implementing, and then monitoring, and then go back again. So then like starting from that, UNDR, we have the guideline that helping the city, helping the local government to understand it well in order to build resilience. So what points that we need to understand? It's just like it's 10 points. It seems, oh, it's just only 10 points, but actually 10 points is it's covered like more or less on how to build the resilience. So the first group that we are focusing is on corporate or city governance. Like the first one that we're focusing on, like organizing for this as a resilience. So meaning that like you need to understand who is doing what, where, and how, where is the resort. And then like you need to understand your risks, current one, previous one, or even like the future one, because well, climate change us all, also change the risks that we currently facing. So that's why you need to understand your risks, and then in order to do everything, you need money. So then the financial capacity for resilience is need to have budget for risk analysis. So this is the first group that focusing more or less on the city governance or the city government official. And then the second group, just to helping you see overall the peak of a picture within your city, within your local government. Like if you have a better city planning under like number 4 or number 5 that you might heard a lot of time this day. If you have any nature-based solution concern in your city planning, or number 6, like not only your city government, but there's also local government official or any other agencies that it like they need to understand or aware of the urban resilience issue. And then not only the government official, within your community. So different group, women's group, person with disability, youth group, or yeah, whatever group. So they need to understand this point too. Because well, like in order to build resilience, it's not only the local government action only. It's you really need to have multi-stakeholder involvement. And then last but not least, your infrastructure, is that resilient enough? So then for this group, you can see that it's looking at overall landscape of your city, of your local government. And then the last group is focusing on response planning. For example, well, in case like disaster response, you have any SOP, anything or any plan for that. But I think like in Thailand or even like in different country in Asian Pacific region, so we quite have a well plan for disaster response. But now like we need to do some kind of proactive, right? So and last but not least, focusing on recovery and also build back, but not only back, it should be better. So then like when we're looking at like this 10 essential, you can see that from 1 to 8, it's focusing on pre-disaster. So it's meaning that the pre-disaster is more important, but I don't mean that, well, the response is not important. Actually, it's important, but we do well on that. So it's time for us to do something proactive. So from those guidelines, so we also move a little bit further to help the local government to understand how well they are, what priority or some point under those 10 essential they are missing. So we have one tool that called Disaster Resilience Scorecard for City. So these two that developed by IBM, AECOM, and UNDR together, it was launched like after Sendai framework in 2019. So these two launched in 2017. So it's a self-assessment tool. Well, because of its self-assessment tool, so then this tool is really focusing on the multi-stakeholder involvement. Because when we scoring ourselves, sometimes we also scoring ourselves a little bit high because we understand what we are doing, but other maybe don't. So then the more stakeholder like involved in this, so I mean like the better that help like the city help local government to understand like in order to achieve 2030's agenda, like Kurt said that, well, we are very far behind the goal that we are planning to do. So these two will help us to understand, well, in order to move forward. So maybe some priority that we might need to focus, maybe on, for example, that like I work with different city. Most of them, they are focusing on like the financial for risk assessment, financial for urban resilience always come as one of the priority. So these two, like they have two version, the preliminary version and also detailed version. So detail, yeah, it's very detailed. It's like 117 questions with score like from 0 to 5. And then like apart from that, so
This me.
Oh.
We'd like to just make it a bit faster because we're
okay, yeah. And this is like the amendment that focusing on different issue, like for example, public health, food security, cultural heritage, and also ENIC for inclusion of person with disability. So these are like for local government and it's free of charge, so they can like just use anytime. And when they do the self-assessment, so this is how it look like. It's based on the 10 essential. The gray area is the maximum scoring. The blue area is what they are doing. So you can see that it can help them to understand that, well, like if you see that there's some gap, like a big gap, so meaning that this area they need to prioritize. Like from here, it's essential 3, or some area that they did very well is on essential 1, that there's no gap at all. So move a little bit further, a very quick one. So what we are doing, for example, we're doing Maldives. So once they finish these two, they identify the area, because there is like each question will ask them to identify key action item. So so once they identify the grouping and then develop to the program. A little bit like make you like have a better understanding. I'll give you some sample from Lisbon. what they plan to do is that from each, like from 10, so they plan to increase scoring for like the second, the essential 2 and 3. You can see like from here. So then they identify action item, and then they group, they identify gap first and group add action item, and then develop to plan or policy. And then develop in like identify like into the timeline. So what they are doing, they is not need to like the local government don't need to do alone. They can work with local government like we do here in Honduras. Or even like in Nepal, that what they are doing is that once they finish the assessment, they just make the plan according to the 10 essential as Sorodia from Nepal is doing. So this is some of the sample that I'm showing to you on like one of the initiative that working at the local level. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sunisa. It's a very exciting examples and processes that we are following in this region. I'd like to invite now Mr. Anthony, Southeast Asia Task Team Leader, Urban Development Specialist, AFD, and talking on adaptation project in Mekong Delta, including BGI and policy dialogues. Anthony is working in the Asia region last 7 years, if I'm not mistaken, and then he is right now leading this process. And as we would like to hear from him and on the AFD experiences. Over to you.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So again, thank you to NORAD and ADPC for the invitation this morning. It's always a pleasure to partner with ADPC and on such important topic for the region. So here I will be mostly trying to illustrate what have been the discussion in Vietnam mostly about trying to integrate better disaster risk management into urban development. And for our friends who are in Vietnamese friends who are in the city in the room, sorry, mostly relating to policy dialogue we started to discuss with MOC, Monterey, related to resolution number 6, the new urban law coming about the land use, but also about all the new approach about the river basin that Vietnam is trying to develop. So as has been already introduced by Kurt and Sunisa, climate change adaptation in Vietnam and the region, it's a difficult task. It requires a lot of means, technical know-how, system fundings, and mostly good collaboration between public policies and these public policies with also individual action with the citizen and the community. That require very strong and organized political will to adequate governance for those policies. And of course, adaptation requires a lot of means in terms of money, anticipation, so to develop, to design a proper infrastructure who would be able to cope with the change of the climate change. So just here in Vietnam, just telling you that we have been involved in some discussion at the national and local level. We're starting due to the benefit of a facility called WARMS to boost our portfolio on resilience on some different region, mostly most impacted by the climate change in the north with the landslide and heavy rain through the coastal area until the Mekong Delta. So the approach with AFD and EU in Vietnam is mostly to try to make the right investment, structure a policy dialogue with the different ministries, the MONRE, the MOC, and the Politburo, because we've been talking a lot with the Economic Commission of the party and also the MPI. So the purpose is to use all the projects we're doing to structure them into a platform, or the platform will benefit from the experience of the local level of the implementation of the project have been designed in order to also nourish the national level on new policy, on trans-ministry approach. There is also other resolution I will mention for my Vietnamese friends about the resolution 148 and 84 about the green growth and the resilient cities. all this discussion, we're trying to push them further to try to have a better integrated approach about urban design, urban planning. So I would say again that Vietnam have been achieving a lot this past decade about new framework, new law, as I just mentioned, about the different resolution, about green growth, about resilience. But we're still having issue for the decentralization between national and local level. And there is 3 key issues I would like to mention, who have been the discussion we're having every day with ministry, with the Vietnamese authorities. First issue is that infrastructure is not only the answer. Clearly, it have a really impact on protection, but it only remain a protective infrastructure. So in Vietnam, there is a gap between what is going to happen, what is already happening about climate change, and the national standards. So the project we're trying to push with the provinces is mostly to try to change a bit those national standards. But also the infrastructure, they have their own limits. They design for certain event, and we cannot, and infrastructure cannot answer all issues. For example, this one in Beijing last August, I don't know if you've been, you have seen that, but I was not so far. So I've been stuck for almost 10 days trying to escape Beijing because the design of the standard didn't take into account the big event, extreme event of rainfall and this typhoon. So if the infrastructure is not the answer, if the infrastructure costs a lot, infrastructure cannot answer all the problem. One of the discussion we're having with the Vietnamese authority is prevention. So when you look at Vietnam, 70% of the population is living along the coast. 80% of the population, 84% are like touched or impacted by floodings. So what could be done? Should we better integrate this risk in planification on that? And here I just take one example of small and quick action could be done sometime because the policies are not here, the organization is not here, but we can manage at minimum to mitigate the risk, find the right investment program for infrastructure or no infrastructure. Is in Quang Tri province. The city is Dong A. So what we have done here, just first quick assessment, vulnerability, hydrologic assessment. So we show with the simulation what would be the major floods at 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and so on. We also integrate the climate change issues, the sea rise level, and so on. So here you have a map who clearly give a clear, quick understanding to the province and the national level. So about should we build or not? And if you dare, you can answer: Are we building in this blue, deep, the navy blue area? Or are we not building? The answer is yes. I don't have the next slide I wanted to show, but if you overlap the master plan, urban master plan on this area, the city plan to build in this area. So what we should do? It's too late. Can we try to work on new standard? Can we try to work on new construction standard, or we try to reorganize the master plan? In Vietnam, it takes a long time to redo master plan. So the solution was to try to integrate this risk in the urban system, in the urban infrastructure, but at least the risk was integrated into urban planning. So with this solution, we try to showcase this issue in different provinces, in different projects we've been working on. So if the prevention requires better planning, what should be the different step to reach a better understanding of the risk, integration of the risk in the planning? The first step is every time you can, you redo master plan, and that's the discussion which we're having with MOC and UDA as well, and the provinces. You need a risk analysis on your territory, and you need to bind it to the regulation. You need to bind it to land use. You need to bind it to your urban planning. So we've been discussing with the provinces, the Urban Development Agency, the MOC in Vietnam, just to try to take the example of what's been doing in France, but also in Europe, that we call a natural risk prevention plan. What is inside is you have just a description of the existing natural risks. You have a clear zoning plan, and in Vietnam, the problem is that land use is managed by Monterey, and the planning is managed by the MOC. So we try to have something we can talk together about trying to adapt the zoning to the urban planning, and of course, construction regulation. Step 3 will be just to develop strategies. Again, you cannot develop costly infrastructure everywhere. Sometimes you just have to retreat in front of the problem. Sometimes you just have to say, okay, this land, 10 years, we cannot build on it. Today we can build, but tomorrow we cannot. So we have to maintain this land as, I don't know, a park, agricultural land, and so on. But you still need adaptation infrastructure. You still need resistant infrastructure. Combining those, developing strategy, having a clear master plan, integrating the risk in the master plan help to have a better strategy regarding the risk. That's, for example, we've been recommended in Dong A. The area will be clearly floods. They just have to forbid to build there. So it's what we call a strategic retreat, because even though they want to build elevated embankment, we won't be able to go further. Just give me 1 minute to conclude. Please. And that's the same. So that's the different the exchange we have with them in order to clearly move to something who is adapted to Vietnam at the moment. The problem we have in Vietnam is that the risk is here. Every day, every year, there is problem. So should we wait for a very integrated approach who requires a lot of time, or should we try, regarding the problem, we have to find a solution due to the fact that in Vietnam, decentralization is complicated. It will happen. We don't know when, but it will happen. But in the meantime, Vietnam, it's a very public-oriented country. So having public bodies who help to develop projects or to monitor or to manage the floods or to manage the issues in some territories could be an answer. So we pushing local public operators. That's what's happening with water agency is going to be promoted in the next year in Vietnam. So I won't go further, but just wanted to show some example of local governance regarding risks and regarding water management and regarding urban management. And I have another example from our Filipino friends, but I can talk at the next time or later on. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And this was very interesting to see your work in the Asian region, and very interestingly, what I'm listening from other panelists, it actually going with the similar note and others. So having said that, we would like to hear a bit different thing now on the mainstreaming nature-based solutions on urban risk governance. We have Ms. Suprani Kampongchun Kunpan, right, from head office Thailand program, IUCN Asia Regional Office. She currently holds the position of head of office at IUCN Thailand, boasting an illustrious career, spanning over 15 years in environmental project management. And her commitment to advocating her knowledge and skill is evident in her academic achievements. So today we would like to hear more on the mainstreaming nature-based solutions in urban governance from her. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator and ADPC, for inviting me to share and representing IUCN to exchange some lesson learned of implementing nature-based solution in Thailand and other countries with all participants here. So let's move on to the next outline. Today, I will explain a little bit about the nature-based solution ecosystem services that I'm sure that you are all familiar with this already. We talk a little bit about the 8 criterion of nature-based solution and how to mainstream NBS in the urban governance. This one, of course, I'm sure that all of you are familiar with ecosystem services, but I would like to emphasize one more time that this is the origin of nature-based solution. It is very important to recognize and make sure that you bring back all the functionalities of ecosystem service in place, although it is in the urban setting. Direct and indirect services, all of you may recognize already that provisioning, regulating, cultural, and supporting are the basic services that could profit the human well-being in the city setting. And it is very important to recognize as well why ecosystem are matters to the urban and especially on disaster risk reduction. Of course, human well-being are 100% depends on the ecosystem, and also enable people to withstand COVID and recover from disaster in the urban landscape. It also can provide cost-effective nature buffers, and healthy ecosystems are more resilient to the extreme weather events. And in ecosystem degradation, especially to the forest or those terrestrial and coastal ecosystem, will reduce the ability of the natural system to sequester of the carbon. So that's the recap of the ecosystem service and why it is very matter to our life in the city. So looking at this conventional practice of the urban development, you see that it has been concretized everywhere, even the canals. Next, when the extreme weather patterns happens in the city, then ability of the city to really absorb or resilient to the impact of climate change will be reduced accordingly. So this is the ideal picture that we would like to see, that how the green infrastructure and urban development could go together in one city. And zoom into this, the benefits of the nature that can be found in the city. You may have known already that NBS could help communities to prepare COVID and recover from the disaster, including those slow onset event like drought. And nature can really be a cost-effective and no regret solution to this, and in reducing risk from the disaster. Next, let's have a look onto the definition of NBS itself. You may have a chance to read through this already, but I will recap one more time. NBS are the actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural and modified ecosystem that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and diversity benefits. The most important line are in the last one, saying that it's the multi-benefits to human well-being and biodiversity. So this is the magic number 572. What are those five ecosystem-based approaches? You see this on top of the umbrella. 7 are the 7 societal challenges that we need to address, and 2 main benefits, as I already emphasized, and human well-being and biodiversity. These are the 7 societal challenges that we have already identified. And of course, disaster risk reduction is only one of the societal challenges that we have found in human society this day. So let's zoom into the criterion. Nature-based solution has 8 criterion, and I'm not going to talk through the details of all criterion, but looking at the first one, the criterion number 1, nature-based solution effectively address societal challenge. Whenever you implement any intervention or any measures in the city, make sure that you go back to step number 1 of what have been addressed as the societal challenge, and keeping the monitoring scheme, make sure that you have all the stakeholder engagement and with the good monitoring plan, and all the results should be seen and go back to the solution of what you want to address since the beginning. So it is the adaptive cycle, no matter what you are doing, but just make sure that you go back to step number 1 of what exactly you want to address and how the consequences or the result of your intervention are contributing to reducing the challenge in number 1 or criteria number 1. And I highlight on the criteria number 8 of NBS are sustainable and mainstream within an appropriate jurisdictional context. This is where we are now. And for example, this one is the social challenges the criteria number one has 3 indicators, and all the 3 indicators that you need to look at and make sure that you achieve all of this. Another criterion that I want to emphasize is make sure that it's scale up. Your result of your implementation are contributing to this global agenda or your national commitment to this global agreement. Now let's have a look closer to some case studies of NBS. You see that this is how the NBS framework can connect to the urban area. This is the good case study of Barcelona in Spain that planning that other speakers has already identified that it should be integrated, not only the development plan, but also the maps or zoning should be integrated. But you have risk-informed maps, you have ecological, critical ecological services mapped or land use map integrated into your development plan as well to make sure that you have comprehensive implementation of the urban development, giving the balance of social, environmental, and economic development. These are some case study of the approaches that implemented in Barcelona. You see that these are family approaches that many cities in Asia implemented. For example, the urban agriculture, the green walls, and for example, the green terrestrial connecting the city. In Bangkok, we have like 15 minutes garden. This is the new policy of Bangkok Metropolitans. It's an effort to put the green space to connect the ecological corridor, make sure that all green space are connecting and people can really like enjoy themselves in this green space as well. Looking at the 3 case studies from other countries, London, Philadelphia, and Barcelona, they're all integrated into their urban planning already. So this is some of the case study that you can have a look deeper. And just to recap quickly that why it is important to work on this building resilient nature-based solution is one of the approach, one of the tool only that you can apply to build the resilience of your city. On the green side, if you want to increase, of course, you need to work on the ecosystem services and make sure that it is a part or the key factor of the urban development in your city. This is the IUCN publication. Of course, you have a lot to read during your weekend or your time here in Thailand, but make sure that if you want to know deeper, please download and see those tools and some publication that we produce. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kunsuprani. And it was great to see IUCN's work. And then recently ADPC had some experiences working with IUCN on these nature-based solutions. And now coming up next, I would like to invite our last presenter, Mr. Chintaka Ganepola. So Mr. Chintaka is the urban risk management specialist at ADPC. Academically, he is an engineering geologist, chartered engineer from UK. Is looking at this urban risk management work last few years, and also he has also a great work experiences on slope instabilities and also the nature-based solutions. So over to you, Chintaka, talking about URC program interventions in strengthening risk-informed urban governance in 2 cities in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you, Nurul, for the nice introduction. And now we heard about different aspects of urban resilience and strengthening risk-informed urban governance from the rest of the speakers, like resilient infrastructure, nature-based solutions, etc., etc. And now let me speak to you all about some of our URC program interventions in Vietnam in strengthening or how we integrate climate, especially climate risk information into urban governance. Under the URC program, Urban Resilience to Climate Extremes in Southeast Asia, we worked in two medium-sized cities. One is My Tho. It is located in the Mekong Delta in the southern Vietnam. And the other one is Nam Dinh City, which is located in the Red River Delta in northern Vietnam. And these are medium-sized cities. So why we choose these cities why we choose these medium-sized cities, because we know that these cities have the potential to grow in future and to be on the first-class cities in Vietnam. So it is better we prepare those cities now, so that once they become class 1 cities, their urban risks will be reduced. So that's our main goal behind this URC program. So what we worked, I mean, first we started with conducting a comprehensive climate inclusive risk assessment. So in that, we analyzed hazards facing these 2 cities. And also we incorporated climate change scenarios. That means looking at future climate, how will these hazards behave? So in these 2 cities, we analyzed flood hazard, typhoon, and heat wave and cold wave. And we incorporated future temperature and future rainfall. Looking at those future temperature and future rainfall, we analyzed how the flood hazard will behave in 2030, 2050, or 2080s. And then we incorporated vulnerability and exposure data. And accordingly, we came up with risk maps for the 2 cities. And when you have those risk maps, it is very much easy or guide. It would be a good guidance for the city authorities to take future actions, future decisions based on these risk maps. Then these are some of the examples of flood hazard what we produced in our project. And this is for My Tho city. We produced a flood hazard map for 2030s and also looking at far future, which is 2080s. So similarly, we developed the same kind of maps for Nam Dinh city as well. And then after developing these 2 maps, what we did, we collect all the development plans in their cities. And then we overlaid their development plans on top of our future risk or future hazard maps. And by doing so, we can identify what are the zones which are vulnerable to climate disasters in future. So this is one of the similar interventions described by Mr. Anthony as well in one of the another different city in Vietnam. So it's a similar kind of approach. But in doing so, we introduced one digital tool for the city authorities, that they can adapt in overlaying this risk information and visualizing the risk information. So this digital tool is called Mobilize. And we worked with the University of Salford in the United Kingdom in developing this tool. And we developed 2 prototype models, 2 city nodes for Nam Dinh and for My Tho city. And we incorporated all the future hazard layers into this digital platform. And so that city authorities, they can overlay different layers and then they can see what are the zones and what are the infrastructure getting affected. So by having that kind of a visualization, it's very much easier for them to take decisions on future, what they need to be done for infrastructure, or whether retrofitting that infrastructure is feasible or not, or if not, do we need to do some kind of a prevention measure, something like that. So this digital tool, it's a user-friendly tool for the city authorities to use. Then based on our climate risk information, and also by analyzing all the city plans in those 2 cities, we developed a series of recommendations for the city authorities to enhance their governance and planning mechanisms. So we developed 3 sets of recommendations and guidance documents. One is on risk-sensitive urban governance, and the other one is on risk-informed urban recovery and redevelopment. And there is a typo mistake. One set of recommendation is on risk-informed urban infrastructure, and the other one is on climate-smart urban recovery and redevelopment. And now we are working with the city authorities to incorporate these recommendations into their action plans. And Mr. Kurt talked about localization. So that is where we want to be with the cities to incorporate these recommendations into their city action plans. And they can propose these city action plans and to the national level agencies and can get the approvals and also the funding, necessary funding for implementing those recommendations. So this is in nutshell what we implemented in URC program, like how we integrated risk information into urban governance and planning, and how we helped these two cities to build their resilience to climate extremes. Okay, so having explained you all that, this is a bottom line I just wanted to share with you all. Understanding future climate is essential for mainstreaming risk information into decision making for achieving city resilience and sustainable urbanization. Then also we must need to keep it in mind that an urban area cannot become climate change resilient by a single activity. Instead, resilience is acquired through a series of activities. And also we need to collaborate with series of stakeholders that needs to be progressed over time. And lastly, lessons learned from the past matters a lot. Such lessons should be used to inform the present and future actions in the path towards resilience. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Over to you, Noor.
So thank you so much, Chintaka, and I found it very much aligned with our other panelists here. So this is the end of the presentation part, and we are now going through the next interesting session is more on the question and answer. So before we open up the floor, I have few queries to the panelists that I would like to ask to Kurt mostly. What are the major challenges you faced with while working to promote urban resilience to climate change and disaster? As you showed some of the things already there, but if you can elaborate a bit.
Thank you, and thanks to the colleagues for all of the presentations. I think there was a common theme throughout. In addressing the challenges, I would say that one of the biggest challenge is that there are too often inadequate planning mechanisms. Planning is foundational for all of the things that all of the speakers have addressed, and it's not just planning for a particular thing. I think that what tends to happen is that often planning is fragmented. So it's looking at what is the current or immediate need to address a particular issue, rather than a comprehensive integrated approach to planning, which again is foundational. There is not a financial institution globally that will finance an initiative or a project that has no plan or backing behind it. So there has to be a demonstrated thought process that engages all of the stakeholders, that takes into account not just the current need, but future projections. That's why the changing demographics is so important to take into account, not just the needs that cities currently face, but what are the needs that will be coming in the emerging decades. And all of that takes into account risk. So when you're talking about mitigating risk, it comes down to what is the planning process that identifies those risks, aligns them with needs, looks at the investment strategies, and reduces the risks for those who are investing in those activities, whether it be at the local level, the national level, or other financial institutions. And I would say that, you know, the one thing that seems to fall apart is that there are not robust enough planning mechanisms to support those decisions. So it's not just risk informed, it's everything informed. It's all about, you know, how is a city growing? How are you managing your resources? Many of the cities in this region, and I'll just bring something up anecdotally, are facing significant and kind of silent crises in water management. Parts of Jakarta are sinking because of over extraction of water resources. Bangkok is facing the same thing. Mumbai, Chittagong, Dhaka. Cities across this region have not managed their resources. It's natural resources, but it's also financial resources. So we're looking at, development at all costs, but unless you plan that development and identify what are the natural resources to manage that increased growth over the years to come, how do you finance that? How do you mitigate the risk to investors? Are you taking into account not just the needs of now, but life cycle costs for replacement of that infrastructure or whatever the activity and project is? And so again, coming back to planning is foundational for everything that a city does and for financing everything that a city does.
Thank you, Kurt. And this is very interesting to know. Like we all are talking about this risk-informed governance, but of course we need to see the robust and overall planning process and natural resources and others. Moving towards to Kun Sunisa, it's MCR 2030. We saw a very interesting presentation from your side. So how do you manage to engage your stakeholders and then also ensure the ownership of this? Because this is something is very, very important from the stakeholder, that whether they own it or not. So if you can put some lights on it.
Well, like talking about stakeholder, I can just give some sample of the city. So the ownership is, of course, that this is very one of the priority. So there is no ownership, it's no sustainability. So that's why, like for MCR, we work very closely with the city, especially like with the mayors and also like with the bureaucrat or the city government, as well as like with the national government, so that to make sure that they are aware of what we are doing, of like we are doing together, what they are going to do, so that they can also like have a better understanding and they have a better ownership. So I can give you some sample of one city in the Philippines, Makati. Makati working together with us, like starting like 10 years ago, like working like using the tools, and then they feel that, well, the result like from the assessment that they did is it's from like their own. It's there has a lot of involvement from different stakeholders in the city. So then they want to develop like themselves together. So once they feel that, well, they are like confident, so this is like their own plan. So then they start like replicate or start sharing those with the city. So this is also one sample of the ownership. And also, or the other flip side, like on the partner side. So like each of us, we have like our own tools, like each agencies. So then like under like MCR 2030, so we work together. Like recently, like we also like have a regional workshop that like we connect our tools, like like each partner together. Let's work to train the city to develop the capacity for the city. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sunisa. So it appears like you try to co-develop with the stakeholders, as well as create some sort of enabling environment within them, so that the ownership is coming up over there. Great to know that. So moving towards to Anthony. I was just thinking of, I saw your presentation. It's a very, very relevant of what ADPC has done also in NORAD. And I was just thinking like, how AFT think about the importance of risk visualization tool, and do you have any good practices to share with us from your side, and also the priorities from your side, like what you are looking at?
Well, as you can see, it's a temporary response. It is useful to sometimes show really the risk, urgent risk to integrate better the issues and the hazard into planification. So that's helpful when in some countries we don't have the backup of the states or the organization or the administration to support that. So that's very useful to answer quickly to a subject, but at the end, he needs data. So the data, it's not always was mentioned just earlier that on some SDG, that's the SDG 11, that's the major concern. We don't have data. So I think there is a way between the data and just normal and basic planification. The risk is here, how we respond to that and how you project that in the future. That's mean for AFD and for personally speaking, I think that planification is a state duty. Planning cities takes time. It needs a long-term vision. You need a clear policies, frameworks to support private sector and not the opposite. I'm not saying that private sector is not contributing to the development of the sustainable cities, but long-term vision for investment and for investors sometimes is good as well. So visualization, to clearly answer your question, is that it's interesting when you don't have any framework because it helps immediately to integrate that in the debate, in the planning, and maybe to develop some standard after. But it's not only one answer.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm moving to Kun Suprani. It's very interesting to see this NBS mainstreaming part. Like it's my current experiences is also like although NBS is not a new idea and it's actually going from the very beginning of human development itself, but in a proper way we are presenting now in a very different term to the government, right? And based on my own experience, it's a bit difficult to encourage governments to go for nature-based solution as compared to the engineering solutions. So how do you manage to encourage urban governance or government people or the decision maker to think about NBS, invest on the NBS? Of course, maybe in collaboration or including with the engineering solution as well. So how do you encourage them to use these things?
Thank you very much for the question. And actually, one of the gaps that we found locally are addressed already by our colleague from UNESCAP about the institutional capacity that has to fill in urgently. That's very important, as well as the financial investment on the capacity building itself and on this green approaches at the local level. That's the first thing that we need to work together at the policy level and together with the local authorities. And the most important thing, just to recognize the value of the ecosystem services. Nature is a part of the urban development agenda. That's the most important line to state here. And NBS is an alternative and complementary approaches to those existing conventional approaches of the urban development, as well as mitigating the urban risk in the long term. So if you want to work on NBS, it is not just today and tomorrow investment. It's such a long-term investment. It is in process development together with the urban development. So it is very important to make sure that those implementing partners or the implementer really understand the concept of NBS. It is not like lower hanging fruit that you can pick up today, tomorrow. It's really long term. So you need to be very patient to talk about it and keep socializing it. Make sure that people really understand it correctly and implement it correctly. And as you are aware already that this region will keep urbanizing anyway. So people are now valuing and recognizing nature. So why not investing in it? You always one step ahead when you invest into nature. And in the future, I'm sure that it will be politically attractive to many financiers or the bankers who want to support the local authorities to cope with these societal challenges that I have already addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prani. There was very, very interesting and a very, very thoughtful answer. So over to last panelist. As I saw from your presentation, a lot of risk assessment and all other things you have done for 2 cities in Vietnam. First question is that why do you feel that risk assessment is very important for doing this kind of urban resilience program? And second is the risk assessment requires a lot of data and good data. So how do you manage to access those data? What are the issues you feel like, and what are the probable solutions you may advise?
Yeah, thanks, Nurul. And let me give my thoughts for that question. So firstly, we need to understand that a majority of the cities, especially in the Asia Pacific region, they are located in climate vulnerable locations like deltaic or coastal cities, or if not in a hilly area. So all those locations, the geography of that location make them vulnerable to climate-induced hazards. So, and also the other aspect we need to consider is that the climate change, and we know that climate change is happening at a faster rate, and the frequency of having climate extreme events, which we have not experienced before, have become less common now. So now, keeping in mind those two aspects, climate risk assessment is foundation for when it comes to designing future policies or future regulations in governance and planning. Then now using, when we work in Vietnam, in those two cities, what we have understood is that some of the development plans what these cities have, they have considered the historical data when drawing out their hazard assessment maps. But now with the climate extreme events happening at a faster rate, that kind of a approach is not enough. So we need to incorporate future climate information into our risk assessment. So that's how we convert the risk assessment into climate inclusive one. Then that kind of a risk assessment provides comprehensive details for the urban decision maker to come up with a comprehensive plans for their future actions. So future, they can revise their future development plans more effectively. That's why I want to say that climate risk assessment is foundational for when it comes to risk-informed urban governance. Then coming back to your second question about the data access, yes, we need a lot of data for doing this kind of climate inclusive risk assessment. And if I share our experience when we do this study in Vietnam, our majority of the data we obtain from open source data portals. So the disadvantage behind that is that some of these open source data portals, they are not very much reliable. And also there is one challenge, because when you go to cities and ask for this kind of different data sets, they will say that they are not available, or they have not collected, or they say that there are restrictions of obtaining data, because the data might be collected by a different agency. And the Urban Development Authority, they do not have access to those that department's data, and they are not sharing with those kind of, those kind of challenges are there. So here, fortunately, we managed to work very effectively with the two city authorities, and somehow or other we managed to get some data with a certain degree of reliability for our risk assessment. And when it comes to data access, one of the challenges I want to mention is that there is no proper coordination between the agencies, for sharing data. So that is one challenge we are facing when we want to do climate inclusive risk assessments in cities. Yeah. Over to
Thank you, thank you. I think this was very interesting, and I can understand like everyone who is working with this topic have the same issue over there, and as also going with what Kurt said earlier, also that it's a planning issue. It's overall holistic planning issue that we have to look at, rather not just to look at the resilience and all these things. So for all of our panel members, any of you can take it up. Like, if we ask, like, what is the only one thing, if we ask, that you wanted to see in Asia, Asian region, or Southeast Asian region, that you would pick up as a one thing that will impact very nicely on our climate resilience and our risk sensitive urban governance. So any of you would like to answer this, Kurt, maybe?
Just one thing, or can I say two? Because they're aligned. The first would be national urban policies with a strong capacity at the local level for urban and territorial planning. And those go hand in hand. You can't really do one without the other. The national urban policies would take into account engagement with national strategies, whether they be on climate or sustainable development. On the local planning, they would take into account capacities, and effective planning identifies where there are data gaps and identifies areas and opportunities to fill those gaps. But it's those two go hand in hand, because you need the national policies to enable and identify what local authorities and cities can do. And you need the local authorities to identify all of their capacities, both within and outside of government, to take actions effectively.
Thank you, Kurt. Anyone from our panelists would like to pick up something else on this before I open up the floor for? Okay, so the floor is open to our participants now. If you have any query, questions to any of our panel members here, please. Maybe in next 5 minutes of time, so we can take up around 1, 2, or 3 questions, please. No queries? Please.
Good morning. I am Alfredo F. Kiblat Jr. from the Philippines, Philippine Atmospheric Geophysical and Astronomical Services under the OST, Department of Science and Technology. My question is for Mr. Kurt. You mentioned that the policy is not advancing enough on climate change and building resilient cities. What do you think is the major reasons for this? Why? And my second question is goes to Ma'am, who introduced the MRC in the Makati city, because I am from the Philippines. After introducing the MRC in Makati, did you make an assessment that the city is improving their resilience to hydrometeorological hazards or any climate extreme events? Thank you.
Let me answer the first question. They're very good questions. The first, why is it not advancing quickly enough? I think relevant to this particular workshop, it's a lack of multi-level governance. That when national climate strategies were put together, including the nationally determined contributions, there was insufficient, and in many cases, none or no at all, interaction with local authorities. What could they deliver to contribute to climate action? What local actions can be supported financially or through policies? And so there was that disconnect between, national climate policies being done at the national level and what can actually be implemented in cities where most of the actions are necessary. is taking some time to actually connect. And that's where multi-level governance actually is the key. Now, the Philippines is actually a very good example because cities have a responsibility to identify climate actions as part of the national and local policies, right? And so if all countries kind of follow that example, I think we'd be further and further along. But once those local actions are identified, they still need to be supported or backstopped by the national government, either in financial support or implementation support or ongoing capacity building for implementation and operations. And to also make sure that the monitoring and reporting and verification is done to ensure that those local actions and investments are actually producing the results that are intended.
Maybe Sunisa.
For the question asking like if there is a better hydrological plan for Makati or not, the reason is I don't know because it's also voluntary for the city to share, but we have the report like comparing like the city that use the tools like joining MCR, they have a better DRM plan. And in the Philippines, not only Makati that we working, we also working with Ormoc City, Baguio City. Ormoc also like bring like the result from the assessment for to their 5-year DRM plan. And also similar to Quezon City, we working focusing on inclusion of person with disability. So they are going to like to take the result from the assessment, like just to develop like the plan focusing on the inclusion of person with disability. So we can have like further discussion on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kun Sunisa. Maybe we can take one more questions. Yeah.
Yes, I got a comment for Mr. Antoine from AFD. Yes, a little bit detail. In your talk, you mentioned about the project implementing in Guangxi province, even in a smaller village, the yellow curve, and you mentioned about something like a respect to the regulation, provincial regulation. And it came to me some reality and expectation when implementing your project. Could you explain a little bit more? What are the challenges? Yep.
Thank you very much for your question. Maybe a little bit of context. Dong'a Guangxi Province, Dong'a City have updated the master plan. Took 5 years to update this master plan. And then after we started to develop this project with the MPI and Monterey and MOSI to see how we can mitigate the risk. So we come up with an investment program there. So in order to have a better, I would say, implementation, we have done these vulnerability studies. We have done this hydro model to see what would be the main risk. And then we advocate to update the master plan for sure. It has to be done. It should be done. But sometimes there is some investment already made. Like all this area have been already pre-construct for waiting for future investor. So that's what I'm talking. Sometimes it's a maladaptation. We invest too fast without taking into taking the context and the problem or the issue will arrive. So here in this area, what we have said that we will support the province and the MOC to develop construction standards for this prone flood area. So to try to adapt the housing and the infrastructure in this sector. That's what will be done. And in the meantime, they can reorganize and update the master plan. That's what we recommend strongly to do.
Thank you, Anthony. And in respect of time, I think we can close up this, and then we can anyway continue the discussion during the lunch break, whenever you have a chance to meet your panelist here. So having said that, I would like to hand over to Khun Pin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nurul, and please give a big round of applause for the great panel discussions to all the panelists. Therefore, I would like to invite Mr. Nurul to give the appreciation souvenir from ADPC to the panelists. And maybe we can have one group photo for the sessions of risk informed for the urban governance. นั่งเหรอ นั่งเหรอ Perhaps for this sit. So the light will not, be in your face. Yeah. Thank you. Bye. Okay. Thank you one more time, Ka. All right, everyone, before we're gonna go for the lunch break, I have a small logistic to announce a little bit. For the participants who came from abroad, please meet Khun Ket